And I am not a psychologist. I want to make that absolutely clear from the start. However, I am fascinated by the psychology of public figures whose behaviour is obviously awful, but continues to receive approval, even admiration from a significant swathe of colleagues, in particular in the population at large. Jacob Rees-Mogg on Channel 4 News yesterday defending Boris Johnson, claiming that he had won in the court of public opinion. It's a moment of such obvious delusion that you are left, as always with Jacob Rees-Mogg, wondering whether he's incredibly stupid or incredibly dishonest, or perhaps 52% one and 48% the other. But there it is, psychologically. You need to create an alternative reality. If you are, as Dominic Cummings calls him, a sort of out-of-control shopping trolley that crashes into things and denies any responsibility for the chaos that ensues, you have to create an alternative reality in which you are not spoiling everything. I don't know why they never released the detail of that tape. When they released the transcript of it, but I don't think they ever released the audio. But when his then fiancée was screaming at him about never taking responsibility for anything and breaking things and not caring. If you are that person, you have to create a world that you believe exists. You can't, I don't think, survive as a human wrecking ball if you are fully conscious and cognizant of the chaos that you cause. I'm thinking of his marriages now. And anybody from a broken home will know the trauma that can inflict upon children. But when one parent is utterly reprehensible in their treatment of the other parent, God only knows what that stores up for the future of their children. And so how can somebody behave like Johnson does, even in the context of his marriages? You remember that awful Jennifer R. Curie woman, the humiliation that he heaps upon his family with all of these ludicrous dalliances. He lied, of course, to Michael Howard about his affair with Petronella Wyatt. It's just gross. It used to be something I genuinely thought the Tories cared about, but it shows what a naive little snowflake I was. How you can't have a conscience, can you? Because if you did something awful once, the weight of your conscience would prevent you from ever doing it again. So I don't know how this works. I don't know how big consciences are. I don't know actually whether in the great scheme of things you are a better person if you have a big conscience than someone who doesn't have any conscience at all, because the reason why you don't do bad things is because you don't want to live with the consequences. The consequences including how awful you would feel about how badly you had behaved. So if you don't have that conscience and you behave badly, are you that much worse than the person with the conscience? Because it's only fear that prevents you perhaps from doing terrible things. But it's also empathy, isn't it? It's fear of how it would make other people feel, you know? In the context of marital infidelity, it's something most of us, or relationship infidelity, it's something most of us can at least get our head around. Why won't you do that? Well, I mean, largely because of the pain it would cause. Well, you won't get caught. And yet Johnson never behaved as if he cared about even being caught. So again, there's another level there of psychopathic conduct. Yeah, okay, lots of people have affairs, and they're very careful not to get found out because of the damage it would do to their family, both in terms of the emotional pain that it would cause to partners and to children, but also to the logistical pain it would cause to everybody if you had to split up. But Johnson never behaved as if he cared about being caught. Never behaved as if he cared about being caught. He used to, when LBC was at Gray's Inn Road, he was having his affair with Petronella Wyatt, and you used to see them sitting in the basement of Pret a Manger just around the corner from the office. Literally everybody knew. Didn't care at all about being caught. And then when you are caught, you somehow persuade the person that you've betrayed that they haven't been betrayed, right? Is that how it works? Is that the narcissist's prayer? Is that where it didn't happen? If it did, it wasn't that bad. It's just a kiss. It's just one night. All right, well, it wasn't that. It was, but it's not a big deal. It's you that I love. She's just a bit of fun. She's just a bit of fluff. Well, all right then, but it's not my fault. She came on to me. This is the narcissist prayer. I'm going through it line by line. All right, all of that stuff happened. But it was her fault. She came on to me. He did that yesterday, didn't he? It was my advisor's fault if they gave me the wrong advice. Well, who did you ask? Spin doctors. You didn't ask the head of the civil service. You didn't ask senior civil service. It's their fault. It's their fault. And anyway, I didn't make... Good God, this is uncanny. This is uncanny. I don't even know where this comes from. Denial, invalidating, gaslighting, blame shifting, accountability issues, and guilt tripping. Look at this. First line of the Narcissist prayer, that didn't happen. What's the first line of the Partygate saga? It didn't happen. Stood up in the House of Commons, said it didn't happen. Guidance and rules were followed at all times. There were no part. First line didn't happen. Second line, if it did, it wasn't that bad. What happened next? Well, all right, they did happen, but I wasn't there. So it wasn't that bad for me. Second line of the Narcissist prayer, if it did, it wasn't that bad. Second line of Partygate from Boris Johnson's point of view, well, all right, if it did happen, I certainly wasn't there. Third line of the Narcissist prayer, and if it was, i.e. that bad, then it's not a big deal. What happened next in the Partygate saga? Oh, all right then, I was there. But it wasn't a party. And that's the third line of the Narcissist prayer. And if it was, that's not a big deal. This is like textbook stuff. Third line, third chapter of the Partygate saga as written by Boris Johnson. All right, there were parties and I was there, but it's not a big deal. Brackets, because I didn't realise they were parties, brackets. Wow. Fourth line of the Narcissist, I beg your pardon. Fourth line. And if it is, i.e. a big deal, if it is a big deal, that's not my fault. Every time I think the next line isn't going to be quite as perfect as the last to prove that this is Boris Johnson's modus operandi in a nutshell, he tried to blame it on everybody else. Oh, and if it is a big deal, that's not my fault. Fourth line of the prayer. And if it is, that's not my fault. So, all right, there were parties and I was there and they possibly were in breach of guidance and rules, but I said they weren't, and that's not my fault. That's not my fault. That's the fault of Jack and Slack, the two communications officers that he kept slinging under the bus yesterday after Simon Case, the head of the civil service, had offered a categorical no to every single question asking whether he'd given Johnson any of this so-called advice. That's not my fault. There was even a moment that we'll definitely be seeing again when he was asked to name the people that he claimed had given him advice. This is in addition to the ones that he did name, and he said he wasn't going to because one of them didn't want to be named in public, to which I was surprised Harriet Harman said, well, all right, well, name the others then. There's only one person that doesn't want to be named. So they'll check that, and it may turn out that he was fibbing about that. So fourth line, if it is, that's not my fault. You heard him yesterday trying to blame his communications director. And if it was my fault, I didn't mean it. Line 5 of the Narcissist prayer. If I did say that the guidance was followed at all times, I didn't mean it. I meant the rules. That is literally what he did. He got picked up on this yesterday. I didn't mean it. He said guidance. He meant rules. He was told to take it out of a speech, out of his briefing notes for PMQs. He took it out, but he still said the words. But he didn't mean it. And then finally, the bit that I don't think fits, but you might be better than me at doing this. And if I did, you deserved it. Does that fit? If I did the bad thing, which is both the parties and the lying about the parties, you deserved it. He did a variation on that by saying we deserved it, didn't he? He said, yes, we did have the parties, but we deserved it. He tried to argue that you needed to have parties at Downing Street in order to keep the office running. The most amazing takeaway from a lot of yesterday's evidence or attempted evidence from Boris Johnson was his apparent ignorance of what everybody else was doing during lockdown. What does he think was happening in other workplaces? What does he think was happening in other offices that you were allowed to return to? Did he think everyone was having drinks parties? I know people who were working with family members outdoors who were observing the 2-meter distance rule and wouldn't even, share the same breathing space. And yet he thought the bit, actually, so much to take away, but the idea that he never really had the vaguest understanding of what does he think nurses were doing? Why were they wearing all that PPE? Probably they took it all off, didn't they, for leaving parties? It's incredible. But there it is. There is Boris Johnson. Didn't happen. If it did, it wasn't that bad. If it was, it's not a big deal. If it is, it's not my fault. If it was, I didn't mean it. And if I did, you deserved it. It's only that very last line I can't quite fit with what we saw yesterday. But of course it fits with every other area of his life. Back to his marriages. I wouldn't have had an affair if you were more affectionate. So you know what these men are like, right? What's it like to live with someone like that? let me begin by saying I'm so sorry for what you must have gone through. And the only inkling I have of what it must feel like is what the country has gone through by dint of being effectively married to Boris Johnson for 3 years. But there was that 3-year courtship as well, wasn't there, after the referendum, when he lied and lied and lied and just broke things, including his own Conservative Party's governments. What's it like to live with someone who cannot tell the truth? And more importantly, someone who refuses to face the consequences of their actions and would do anything to avoid taking responsibility for them. That's the crucial bit. The lies are born of the refusal, a complete refusal to face the consequences of their actions and a willingness to do absolutely anything to avoid taking responsibility for them.